Our next speaker is going to share some information that you might not have heard about yet, but you'll be quite educated when she's finished. Her name is Patti Gettinger. She's vice chairman of the Georgia Tea Party. She serves on the federal task force, and she focuses especially on energy and environmental issues. And she shares the research that she does on her free website, which she'll tell you about when she speaks. She has bumper stickers for you too that have the website on it. She works as a marketing manager for a major packaging company, and she lives in Cobb County with her husband. And I'd like you to welcome Patti Gettinger.
Thank you so much for inviting me here to speak tonight. I'm very glad to be here. The information I'm going to tell you is probably going to freak you out. In fact, the first few times that someone emailed me about it, I said, delete, weird, kooky stuff, delete. And then someone asked me, would you please just go and research this? And I found it very frightening and very real. It's called Agenda 21, but it comes under a lot of other different names: smart growth, sustainable development, livable communities, new urbanism, comprehensive planning. And I'm telling you folks, this is a wolf that is at your front door. It is happening at every level of government, at the city, county, and state level, and at the national level. And it's being implemented using these really pleasant sounding names. I mean, sustainable sounds reasonable, doesn't it? But when you find out what that really means, it's very, very scary. Because basically it represents a centralized, top-down, very restrictive planning program. And what they're doing is they're baiting the public by saying, well, this is environmentally friendly. But it's not. Here's some red flags. Anytime you see this, you should know that there's something very dangerous coming our way. Discouraging cul-de-sacs, minimizing private yards, very high-density residential, discouragement of autos in favor of public transportation or pedestrianism, prohibiting strip malls, promotion of all kinds of communal facilities and green space, and the use of eminent domain for things like parks and other things. This is a basic intrusion on your private property rights. And how are they going to do it? It's going to be through the implementation of 1,000 paper cuts. Okay, it's going to be zoning laws, easements, fees, permitting, use of the Endangered Species and Wetland Restrictions Acts, and hundreds of other tools that they're going to use to make you where you can't do what you want to with your own property. So when I started doing my research, I said, well, I'm going to go explore what's happening right here in my own county. Okay, so I looked at the city of Marietta. And you can see there's all kinds of comprehensive plans, livable centers initiatives. And if you go, I know y'all can't read this. If you can, you can see better than I can. But these are the kinds of restrictions they put on development in Marietta. They call suburban residential 6 dwelling units an acre. Mixed use would be 38 dwelling units an acre. Setback from the sidewalk, 0 to 10 feet. You can't even put a tree in that space. It'll be grown up through the sidewalk. Right. Mandatory green space, 20% for any developments over 10 acres. Well, I went and said, okay, what's my county doing? Well, they're following the Atlanta Regional Commission's, that's ARC's, Green Communities Program, and they have zoning ordinances for 4 areas that they call redevelopment overlay districts. And what they're doing is they're targeting certain areas for mixed-use sustainable communities, which is very high density, and they're going to use our tax money to incent the developers to follow all this regulation minutia. And they got it all laid out. We know where they're going to try to do this. There are 4 areas in Cobb County mentioned in this plan. Well, one of the things I found very disturbing is if you were to look at the University of Moscow planner's book called The Ideal Communist City, and then compare the principles of smart growth and sustainable development to what's in the Cobb County 2030 plan. grief! There's an awful lot of, let's see here. Yeah, that's a good word. Anyway, there's a lot in common on that list. It's high-density housing, stops sprawl, transit-oriented development, discourages auto parking, okay, minimizes private yards. I mean, this is right out of the Soviet playbook. And even worse is it includes a reference to the United Nations in that plan. And we're going to talk about where all these crazy ideas started from, and it was in the United Nations. The Soviets had micro-districts, and what they did is they would bundle people up into these stack and pack, okay? Very high-rise, very condensed. And they would decide based on your family size what kind of building you got to live in. If you were a bachelor, you lived in a hotel. If you were a medium-sized family, you got to live in a 4 or 5 story high-rise. And if you were a big family, you lived in a little 2-story cottage. And so they would pack all the residents into these micro-districts, and then surrounding that would be communal facilities, laundromats, little shops, banks, or whatever. Well, when I was speaking to a group up in Swanee recently, I said, well, we'll go see what they're doing up in their area. Well, there on the left is the Soviet micro-district, and guess what? On the front page of the planning group that did their plan, which is ECO's environmental design, those are identical. It almost looked like they took that photo and made it into an illustration. It was shocking. And guess what? Their city council adopted it already.
These laws, are they just taking advantage?
I'm sorry?
Are these already laws in effect?
Oh, yeah.
So the only way you can do it is hire a lawyer and fight them?
I'm going to go through some of the things that we've, come up with for action plans at the city, county, and state and national level. Okay? So bear with me, there is hope. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you now that they're well entrenched and well established, and it is going to take a lot of hard work to stop it. Because most of us it's been going on for quite some time, and we just weren't aware of it. If you look at the symbolism, I want you to notice, it may not be in every organization, whatever, that you look at, but if you see something like this, it should make those red flags, go off. The stack and pack residential, look up there. See those tall buildings? That's all where they want you to live. And then around the edges, they got the communal area, commercials and banks and stuff. Lots of green space. There's the mandatory green space requirements. Down in the livable centers, there's people walking in their buses. No cars up on any of those, is there?
You have a comment over here?
Yes.
Ma'am, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but I just have to say a thing. This is a United Nations program which has not been ratified by the Senate of the United States. There are 40,000 communities in the United States of America which have been working with non-governmental organizations, United Nations organizations, taking funds from United Nations funds, which is a violation of the Constitution.
All right, we're going to talk about that in
and
just a
city governments
second.
are working with the United Nations to implement this plan, even though the Senate has not ratified this. This is illegal.
Yes, it is. Next, please. In addition to what's happening in your cities and counties, we also have community investment districts around Georgia. Those are authorized by state law. And in my area, we have 2, Town Center and the Cumberland CID. And when they were originally set up, they were given some authority to tax the businesses in their areas. Well, over time, as with all authority, they have grown out of their britches. And they keep expanding. Well, now we're going to expand our authority to this, and we're going to expand to this. And they are now using that tax money to promote the transportation tax. They did it to promote the sales tax. So they're using, and these are unelected officials. How do you get rid of bad apples? Okay, very dangerous. They can be when people abuse their power. Next. This is the community that the town center CID put together. You got your high density residential at the top. There's your big old green space in the middle with a trail. Now, how many of you are going to take a trail to the mall? I mean, I just frankly can't quite understand that. There's the mall down at the bottom. In addition, there's all these public-private partnerships and other non-governmental associations. ICLEI is a danger to you. In their brochures, they have, guess what? The Socialist Center for American Progress prominently featured in their literature. Okay? And they are going out and getting cities to pay them to implement these plans. If they're doing anything in your area, if your local legislators are talking to them, you need to nip that in the bud right away. Next, please. Go back one. Oh, way. Okay, the Atlanta Regional Commission. They operate under the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, and they have their Green Communities Certification Program, where they do all these rules and ask your local governments to comply with them in order to get this certification. And they have livable centers and lifelong communities, and again, they are promoting the transportation plan. And for the metro area, it's really ugly. I don't know what y'all are being asked to do out here, but it's really ugly down where I am. The Georgia Department of Community Affairs, under their fostering sustainable development. Here's how they define quality growth. No cul-de-sacs, pedestrian communities, reduction of urban sprawl, small residential lots, and starter code banning strip malls. And this is the one that just really burned me up. Require a land use permit to use or occupy any building, structure, land, water, or premises. I don't know about you, that feels a little invasive. I mean, and I've provided the links. Y'all have a CD that has this presentation on it. You're welcome to go and look and follow these links. These are their words, folks. I'm not reinterpreting what they're saying. Very scary stuff. Next. Last year, the House passed HB 225. Which says it is the policy of the state to promote sustainable agriculture. Well, if you look at sustainable table, how do they define that? No tilling, because you can't scratch Mother Earth, okay? No machinery. Oh my God, they have us all, hitched to a plow or what? No fertilized pesticides, herbicides, no large agribusiness, use animal and human waste fertilizers, ew. No dust production. Those of you that have ever been around a farm know that I don't know how in the world they would do that. No carbon-based, fuel-driven distribution. So I don't know how you're going to get your food from California, and the seasons are different. It could really make our menu a lot different, couldn't it, for what we had for dinner that night. And of course, your regional transportation plan is, if you're going to have a rail system, what do you have to have in order to support it financially? You need high density. So if you look at what the Transit Planning Board said back in 2007, we need to work with our local governments in making sure they support land use policies that would support our proposed transit investment. Not put transit according to what your communities are. They want to do it the other way around. And of course, there's only one option. This effectively is the end of home rule. And in the state constitution of Georgia, it advocates home rule. Local self-government is supposed to give you some freedom of measure of freedom from the state legislator. And basically, you're talking about going to like a regional mayor and regional transportation authorities that want to take away the right of local citizens to determine their future. So let's back up a little bit further. Let's go back up to the national level. Well, there's the Partnership for Sustainable Communities. It was created in 2009. And it's a partnership between 3 federal agencies, the EPA, Housing and Urban Development, and Transportation. And guess what? Their guiding livability principles are all these smart growth things. Next, please. Going back further, we'll have that happen at the federal level. In 1993, President Clinton issued an executive order to create the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And they issued a number of reports. I think there were maybe 7 altogether, but one of them is population control. Because, you know, after all, you have more people and you're going to disturb Mother Earth. And it talked about the replacement of technologies from the light bulb to the power plant. Oh my God! That's exactly what's happening to us right now. I mean, I've got a 30-year supply of incandescent light bulbs in my attic. And why did he issue that executive order? It all started here in 1992 at the Earth Summit. It was the United Nations Conference on Environmental and Development, or UNCED. Remember that acronym? It was called Sustainable Development Agenda 21. And what are its principles? It's basically an international sovereignty, environmental protection, go to communally and collectively owned, managed land. That's basically an elimination of private property rights. Population growth control, urbanization, stop urban sprawl and protect green space, and restrictions to mobility. Public transportation, bicycles, pedestrian communities, and propagandize our children and build non-governmental partnerships. Well, I'd say they've been pretty successful, haven't they?
Yes.
These policies have been described as the constitution of the new green world order, with environmentalism as its surrogate religion. Because you remember, communists and socialists don't like religion. But it leaves a hole in their hearts. And what do? They want to fill that by saying, making Mother Earth, okay, replace God. It's fundamentally a socialist plan to change the way we live, eat, learn, and communicate. Because we must save the Earth. Maurice Strong, who was Secretary General at that Earth Summit, said this: current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home and work air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. More than 178 nations adopted this as official policy, including us. There's a difference between adopting a policy and ratifying a treaty. Adopting a policy is considered soft law, so it didn't require any approval by Congress. And if you think, oh, well, 1992 was a long time ago, this is what they're calling the Marrakesh process. It was the meeting that was held in May of this year. And they want to set their policy actions for sustainable lifestyles. That's regulatory, economic, and institutional frameworks, urban planning and land use policies, including laundromats so that you don't have to own your own washing machine anymore. Using traditional economic instruments, taxes, charges, government grants. Okay, throw out that bait because, you know, our governments are struggling financially. Let's throw them a little money and make them bow down to our rules. And education, communication, and marketing sustainable consumption and lifestyles is a paramount task because materialism is toxic for happiness. Next, please. The Department of Agriculture, on its website, talks about it. You know, protect the farm and forest land so you can't use it for anything else. If you want to farm and you want to have your kids build a house on it, you could be prevented from doing that because you want to preserve the rural character. Restrictions on grazing, wildlife, wetland conservations, it goes on and on. In June, Obama created the White House Council, Rural Council, to promote expanding opportunities for conservation on working lands, and his privately owned property folks, and public lands. And basically, you know, goes through a number of things. Green space, livable communities, blah, blah, blah. More of the same. What scares me about this Let's talk about Stalin and Mao Zedong. What they did, they stripped landowners of their property. They organized their cities into communes, their citizens into communes. They centrally controlled agriculture, and they had some industry that they wanted to promote. Steel, iron, building products, or whatever. And on the Rural Council, you know, there are some points on that I don't know where it's going, but we need to be very, very vigilant. Because this Rural Council may be headed by the Department of Agriculture, but it also includes members from 25 other federal agencies. And I'm not kidding, these things could be very, very dangerous to us. Next, please. Right now, 4 federal agencies own 630 million acres of land. That's the size of 10 European countries. And they want more. In fact, there was recent hearings by the Interior Department where there were efforts to declare millions more acres as national monuments. Well, wouldn't you be surprised to find out a lot of these are right on top of where there's natural resources? Okay? If you want to cripple, the socialists want to cripple our economy, you put our energy off limits to us. Because without energy, you're not going to have material things at all, will you? We're all going to be living by candlelight, growing our own gardens. Next, please. Infiltration of our education system. There are several Georgia universities now that have degree programs in sustainable development. I don't know what they're teaching in them, but I figure I better go start investigating. That makes me very nervous that there's propaganda and indoctrination of our kids. The National Association of Scholars said this: sustainable development has a ubiquitous presence in the K-12 curriculum. Sustainability is used as a means of promoting to students a view that capitalism and individualism are unsustainable, morally unworthy, and a present danger to the future of our planet. Do you know what the kids are being taught on Earth Day? If you don't, I would suggest you find out before next year.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I'm the member. I was the president of the Daughters of Green, and I liked the things that are being taught.
So you didn't see any trouble with your liberties being disturbed? Well, good. I mean, I'm not saying that we are all called to be good stewards. All of us. They're gifts from God. We need to be responsible with the things that we have. But when you start making your fall second place to the well-being of another human being, then I have troubles with that. If people are going to starve, okay, or die from heat because they can't afford to have their air conditioning or whatever those things are, there's some reasonable balance in being good stewards and conservationists. But I ask you very strongly, watch out for that stuff. And if you see something that you find disturbing to your rights, please speak up and get someone to help you fight against it. If it's all good stuff, then great. I have no problem with that at all. So what are the results? You got millions of dollars that are spent by governments to acquire private land, which is then centrally planned and managed. There's the assault on private property rights, designating land for public use. That no longer means, folks, that it's for a school or for a firehouse. It could be for a park. They want to designate prime farmland in other rural areas as preservation areas that can't be developed. You're going to downzone the land. If you can't use your property, well, you know, if the price of it's surely going to fall. And what will the government do? It buys it up because nobody else will get it from you. Miles of sidewalks to no pedestrians. I don't know how that is out here, but they just built some mega miles of sidewalks near me, and I count. I go put that by there several times a day, and I've seen 9 people in 2 years. 9. Wonder what that cost is. Next, please. What does the Heritage Foundation say? Restrictive state and local land use regulations are a key factor in escalating housing prices. Delinquency and foreclosure rates in the areas with tight land regulations are among the highest in the nation. Americans for Prosperity says, aside from the staggering presumption that a select group of elites in America should be allowed to decide how and where the rest of the people live, the reality of smart growth is that it often fuels suburban sprawl, pollution, congestion, and a lack of affordable housing, the very problems it purports to solve. In other words, smart growth is about control. It's not about saving the environment. Giving someone else unfettered access to your energy, land, and transportation gives them unfettered control over you, and it tramples on our liberty. And as one pundit said, smart growth, smart for who? Next, please. Keep going. Sorry, I don't know how that got on there. Just go all the way down to the bottom. So, 5 counter strategies. Stop the creation of these non-elected government people because they're going to get between you. And if they're in there, you can't get rid of them. You can't vote them out. You need to make sure that your local governments don't get sucked in, by the lure of money because their budgets are tight. Because then that's going to come with lots of strings to things that you don't like. You need to remove all these outsider organizations, make sure there's no involvement with ICLEI, and you need to begin the process of reversing the initiatives in your community. Next, please. And I'm not going to go through all these next slides. I'm sure that your leadership will help you figure out what are the things that you need to do. But one thing you need to be aware of, you need to start going if you're not already going to these meetings. Okay, you need to go and you need to find out if they have these, what they call charrettes, public input on development. There's a technique that they use called the Delphi method. And they've already decided what they want the outcome to be. And you will think you're giving public input, but the results won't really reflect what was said in those meetings. And you need to know this technique, and you need to know how to counter it. So number one, you'll be recognized when it's being used on you. And I provided you a link to some great techniques for understanding it and disrupting it. You need to know your city county plans. And there's a whole long laundry list here, but you need to look for the phrases, the regulations, all the things that should be the alarm bells for what is happening in your community. Who are the third-party players? The NGOs and the PPOs. Next, please. At the state level, you need to be contacting your state and senators and reps to strengthen the eminent domain law. I mean, we have a good one, but it's not strong enough to protect us. We need to repeal the Sustainable Agriculture Bill. We need to rein in the power of the CIDs. There was a bill that was introduced last year by Senator Frank Ginn to return comprehensive planning decisions to local communities. It passed in the House and Senate, but got vetoed by the governor. We need to defang the Atlanta Regional Commission. We need to oppose regional authority of all kinds, whether it's regional mayors or whatever else that might be, that limits our ability to set our own paths in our own communities. And we need to repeal and modify the T-SPLOST legislation. At the federal level, we need to make sure our guys are defunding these monstrosities that are growing like a cancer in our country. There's a number of EPA programs, the Partnership for Sustainable Communities, the Smart Growth Network, any programs that require comprehensive planning programs, these federal grant programs, okay, that basically put them on a leash, the smart growth encroachment on our farms through the Department of Agriculture and the Department of the Interior, the White House Rural Council. We need to make sure that when they're budget cutting, these are great places to start. Next, please. And of course, sometimes the Tea Party says, well, you're just about saying no all the time. Don't you have an alternative plan? This is one document I would encourage you to be familiar with. It does give some alternatives to smart growth, and it's been vetted by some organizations like the Heartland Institute that I feel are reputable, conservative organizations. So I'd encourage you to look at that too. That's the last one. Any questions?
This is not a question, it's a statement. Last week I went to Cherokee County meeting, and it was about T-SPLOST. And I didn't know until then, and maybe you can clarify this, Patti, but it seems like Georgia's divided into 12 sections, and there's 18, in our area, Cherokee, there's 18 counties that are involved. And we cannot get out of this, even though if we just wanted to pay this post for Cherokee, we can't get out of it because it's by the legislature has demanded that we all stay in it as a group. And I'm sure that Pickens is in another group, but they're going to be in with other people. And so that means you're going to have to pay for other counties, whether Pickens wants it or not. And so we have to send this back to the legislature and have them amend this because it's really rotten.
Absolutely. You need to make sure before the session starts in January that you have talked to these folks and said you need to undo some of this, because otherwise it's going to be so painful. In Cobb County, we have like $1 billion that's going to come out of our sales taxes. And something like 85% of it is for light rail. And of that 14 miles, 1 mile is in our county. 85% for 1 mile. And it's going to benefit downtown Atlanta. Oh, but we're regional. Okay, these are things like, it does nothing to relieve congestion. All the congestion we have is going to be north of there. But oh no. And unfortunately, our commissioners have not been helpful, to say the least. That's being kind. I have another word, but I can't use it in public. Yes.
How do we let this happen?
Well, you know, it's what I call the Rip Van Winkle effect. At least what I call it for me. I was asleep. I was busy raising my family and working and, you know, running my life and just assuming that the people we elected to office were working on my behalf. And then suddenly I woke up and I said, what the heck has happened? Oh my gosh, I mean, it's just horrible stuff. And I think most of us are busy running our lives. And we didn't know. I mean, I didn't know about this until a few months ago. It's like, how did that happen that I never was aware of it? But you know, if there's one blessing that we have, is that in the last 2 years, we have an awakening in our citizenship. Okay? They're starting to learn more about the Constitution. I don't know about y'all, it's been a long time since I've read the Constitution. And now we're becoming familiar with it. We're understanding. I can name who my representatives are at the state level. I could have told you like the week before election day, but never after that. But we're all waking up, and we're learning, and we're finding out how to fight back and what we need to fight back against. And so there's hope for us. Yes.
I'm sure we can Google Agenda 21, but do you have any websites to start with, and what does CID stand for again?
It's the Community Investment District is the CID. And I've actually provided Susan with a CD that has a ton of resources. Last Saturday, we had a meeting. We had, I think, 105 people representing the leadership of Tea Parties all through central Georgia. We had folks as far away as Savannah, you know, out to the west, to the east. I mean, really, central Georgia is all represented. And we put all of our documents, all the presentations that were made, all the links, everything is on that CD. And however y'all go about sharing information, it's all there with everything that at least we were able to cram into that 8-hour day. And just so you know, you're not alone. There are people, Tea Party people all over central Georgia and other places I'm sure that were too far to travel to our event. But if we all work together, I mean, if Cobb County folks just went and did it, well, that's not enough power in the state to really affect any change in the laws. But if it comes from 25 counties or more, I mean, then we can actually make a difference. And we just need to make sure that at the beginning of the session that we do the stuff we need to do at the state level. Of course, I'm sure there's a million issues at the federal level you want to talk to your guys about, but you know, try to find some time to work on this one. But really it starts right here at home. What's happening in your city and in your county.
I used to live in a cul-de-sac, and I thought it was a real nice little spot. What's the problem with cul-de-sacs?
Well, because it discourages walking, it requires a car, it impedes the flow of traffic. That's what it says in some of the smart growth literature. And it's like, wait a minute, that's where the developers really make their money, because everyone wants to pay extra to live on a cul-de-sac. It's safer for your kids. But see, they don't want your kids to play in your yard. They want you to all be in a communal park and use communal facilities. And I mean, basically, if you look at my life, they play a big bullseye on me. Everything about my life has a big target on it.
Does that mindset include gated communities like Big Canoe and Bent Tree?
Oh, I'm sure. Now, here, let me tell you this. You may not know how your local officials feel. Don't go in there assuming that because they've done something bad, that they're evil. Now, I've got at least one on mine that really is evil. But the other ones, sometimes they don't know what this stuff is. And they use the pretty words, okay, and it sounds okay, so, in Washington, they're not even reading the bills before they sign them. You think they read all the stuff locally too? They don't. So give them the benefit of the doubt. I would give you one word of advice. If you go in and start saying United Nations Agenda 21, they're going to go, bleep, because you're going to sound like a kook. What you need to do is start with the terms that they're using. If they're using smart growth, if they're using sustainable development, and you need to really research, do your homework before you go and talk to them. Okay, so that you know what you're talking about, you can communicate with them in a rational and reasonable way. And sometimes they might say, well, I don't know what I think about that. Give them a chance, okay? It was a lot. It's probably a lot for some of y'all to digest all this stuff that's going on. It took me a while to digest it. So give them the benefit of the doubt. But if you work with them and they do understand it, and they are just bent and determined that they are going to push it forward, then you know who you need to vote out.
There's got to be thousands and thousands and thousands of people working in these organizations.
Yeah.
And how many of those people do you think even begin to understand what they're really, what they're, I mean, they don't have the slightest idea that this is communism and it's.
Even a lot of our young
40,000
people,
feet
they weren't
across the
around
States.
when we were fighting communism. This is all new stuff for them. I mean, it's hard to be afraid of a threat. I mean, they don't remember the bomb shelter days. My uncle actually had a bomb shelter in their backyard in case of, and what's really funny is, they made you go get under your desk in case of a nuclear attack. It's like, what? Okay. I mean, we've come a long way since then, but I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of young people that don't remember 33 records. Right? I mean, it's beyond, and if you haven't had to fight that battle, and the World War II veterans, I mean, a lot of them aren't here anymore to tell that story. But you can talk to immigrants, and some of those people are the most passionate about the freedom that we have here, because they can tell you what happened in Cuba, or in Russia, or in Soviet Union, or in Venezuela, and it terrifies them that they fled to a land they thought was safe, and that we're just going to be.
But there's a problem. We're not teaching history in school.
Right.
We got kids that don't even know when World War II. They don't know the difference between World War I, World War II, Korea. They have no idea. They don't know.
It's a sad truth.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes I get a lot of fun out of being negative about everything. That's not really true, but that's sort of the comment. I have about 20 things to say, and I'll quote it down in one or two. I'm a civil engineer, been for many years, and most of my career has been site planning and design for about 40 years. And I'd never heard of Agenda 21 until within the last month. But I can tell you, and you pointed out, this is nothing new. Over the 40 years that I've been in this business of trying to get permits to build things, it's been an evolution, really. It's so deeply ingrained now that it's almost unheard of to even question these things. Sure. And it has grown, just to try to keep my words to a few. In the early 1970s, if I were to get a permit for building something, a building or a subdivision, whatever, in particularly in Gwinnett County, I would charge my customer, not the subdivision, but for a building site plan, maybe $300. There's a point to this. It's not about how much money I make or don't make. The last site plan I did in Gwinnett County was over 2 or 3 years ago, and I charged about $30,000. And the point is, I'm not making any more money. That's just how much more work it is. And it's not engineering, it's meeting the laws. And there's a young lady over here
The death by 1,000 paper cuts of regulations.
Exactly. All these things are good ideas. You mentioned dust control. Well, you can't get a permit these days for over an acre of disturbance see the chance of turning this around. I don't think the people who enforce this and who are involved in this are see this in a political way. They don't see
understand
themselves
it.
as socialist or anything of that
No.
nature. They think they're building that
Oh, it's-
better world.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
these factors-
They think it's going to be
right, there are
for the
gonna be
benefit.
one item, but it's here with us, and I don't
It
see
is.
it changing.
Well, good news is, even though we're just waking up here in Georgia to this threat, there are other places that have been very successful. And last week, we had the Fayette County Commissioner, Steve Brown, speak to our group. And his presentation is on the CD. And he talked about how they defeated it there. There's some folks up in Maryland that successfully defeated it. So it can be done. It can be done. But it is going to take a very concerted effort and an education and explanation. Pain points are going to be really good for you. Private property rights. Okay, how many people have been hurt, or builders who have been hurt? You need to find out what those, go to strip mall owners and say they've got their businesses in there, either the people that own the land or the people that rent or lease the spaces that are in there, saying, did you know they don't want you to have a strip mall business anymore? I mean, I don't know about you, but that consists of probably 75% of my shopping. Do those people know that they're going to be pushed out? You need to go to people that live on cul-de-sacs. If you went and told them, guess what? They don't like you living on that, and you're not going to be able to, if you move, you might not be able to find a place that has one. Or they might decide they're going to come through and redo your street so you don't have one anymore. Those are the ways that you can go to people and explain to them what the threat is specifically to them. Because if it's some general thing, it's like, it doesn't have anything to do with me, and they're not going to get engaged. But when you see how it hurts you specifically, okay, and your farmers, I tell you what, there's a big wave of stuff coming their way. Big. I mean, you might be a fabulous resource to this group to help explain your local regulation minutia.
Well, it's the growth of big government and its control over people, and that's exactly, if you're going to do any good, what you have to fight against, and you have to see it in those terms. If you fight against any particular item, like erosion control fences or what you name it all, they're all good things in and of themselves.
Right.
You can't attack
It's
that.
how you implement it.
You have to somehow point out how each of these is another cut, as you say, and it's less freedom for us. And you can still do these things, but not be forced to
There's
do
a way to do it in a more sensible and reasonable and still be good stewards without cramming us all together into an anthill. With all the problems that solves. In fact, I through my work on this issue, I met I guess he does like software for development, and he showed how you could, because I'm getting older. Mowing the grass is getting to be a real pain. Having a smaller yard is not necessarily a bad thing. I just want to be the one that chooses how big my yard is. But he's actually come up with a way that you can increase the density and still have beautiful lots. Not these cookie cutter things that look like the Soviet micro districts where there's all identical in rows one after another that is just with no yards. So, there are ways to do it in ways that are sensible and meaningful and that don't intrude on our private property rights. The whole thing is the mandatory versus voluntary. But that's why they're using the Delphi method to convince you, okay, that it's voluntary. Any other questions?
Over here.
Yes, sir.
I don't know whether these people in here understand this, but that presentation you just gave is worth $1 million plus. And there's a little jewel not in there. U.S. Department of Agriculture. Put under their search engine food, F-O-O-D, hubs, H.
Food hubs.
Food hubs.
Okay.
Put that in there.
All right.
And that brings up their little communities they will build here, young, and there for the express purpose of getting everybody good, nutritious food. But
Hey, I tell you what, if y'all ever had to live off any garden plot I have, you hope you have a gun so you can shoot some squirrels, because I'm not going to be able to grow anything.
But
I have a brown thumb.
also in all these community developments for this food project stuff is health centers. Brings up this point. I said to Representative Graves at his town hall meeting, I said, if conservative Republicans need to be making a list of all these items that we have got to repeal. Oh, we're going to repeal health care. I said, sir, it goes deeper, deeper, deeper than that.
Frankly, I think you could take all of our federal agencies and chop them in half, and the economy would like rocket. You know, I mean, on this website that I have, I do a lot of work, research. I follow all the hearings and bills and stuff on energy and the environment, which is sort of how I got asked to do the smart growth. I have some bumper stickers. They're free. You're welcome to take them. I post all this information there. All my presentations that I've done on the EPA, the precautionary principle, and so forth are all there. All the speeches that I do to other organizations. I have a list of all the bills that are in progress, where they are, what their status is, what hearings are coming up, with links so you can go and read the testimony for yourself. I read all of it that's related to energy and the environment, all the news articles that I can find. So they're all posted there. So if you know, those are issues, the regulatory stuff, that's why I call it regs gridlock, regulation gridlock. So I would encourage you to, if you ever need to look up something, there's a host of information I have posted there. Yes, ma'am.
All those organizations that you listed, a bunch of them, all those people that work there, are they all paid by the U.S. government? Are they paid by the government?
At the federal level, yeah, they're all government employees, but then you got the outsiders that are going in. For example, on the EPA, they have the green groups, right? I call them the eco-blackmailers. And what they do is they sue the EPA. And the EPA says, well, I have to settle with them because I'm in a lawsuit. So they expand their power. And then what do? They give grant money to the eco-terrorists who then use that money to sue us. Okay, then the states or businesses have to sue the EPA to try to say, you're crushing us here. And oh my gosh, can you imagine how much taxpayer money is spent in doing that? It's horrible. And that's just one agency. That you multiply that, I don't know how many federal agencies are there. You know, way too many. Right. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'm not really understanding like why it's such a horrible idea.
What part of it?
You're saying that like it.
We can't hear.
Yeah.
I'll repeat it.
And
Okay, you want
I don't understand what's so horrible about it because it sounds like to me like you're talking about the environment when you give speeches, but I feel like you're kind of making fun of the EPA.
Yeah. What explanation of why? Okay. For example, did you know that the EPA was going to make spilt milk classified under oil spills? Now, doesn't that seem kind of ridiculous? You've been on a farm, you ever seen a farmer out there plowing? You see the dust that comes up? That you would prevent him from being able to plow his field? Does that seem a little over the edge to you?
Yes, but most of the things that you listed up there said discourages or encourages. It didn't necessarily say no. The only thing I saw no was the no strip mall.
With socialism is incremental, okay? And what it is, it's a slow process of rot. It's like the example of the frog being boiled alive in the water. If you put the frog in the water when the water's cold and continually heat it up, he doesn't realize until it's too late he's being boiled alive. Socialism is very much like that. It takes a little bit of your liberty, and then a little more of your liberty, and then a little more, and before you know it, you're in tyranny. And that's why you have to be aware of the warning signs to say our liberty is in danger and stop it before we're living under someone like Chavez, okay, or Mao Zedong or someone else like that. You have to know, I mean, these are all violations of the Constitution. It really goes back to that. Because what's one of the rights that's listed? There's a right to private property. And these are all encroachments on the fundamental building block of our rights.
But we do live on Earth, and if we don't save it now, when we take it now, there might not be Earth in the next century.
I would love to have a conversation with you about this. I know that we're out of time, and